Open the case. The command cut through the steady hum of Terminal C like a blade through paper. Conversations faded. Rolling suitcases slowed. Even the distant announcement over the airport speakers seemed to dissolve into the background as Officer Ryan Walker placed a hard-sided black case onto the inspection table and fixed his attention on the woman standing across from him. Maya Brooks didn't move. She stood quietly beneath the bright fluorescent lights, her dark coat still carrying tiny drops of rain from outside. Around her, travelers exchanged curious glances. Some paused. Others pretended not to watch while watching anyway. Ryan tapped the side of the case with 2 fingers. "One more chance," he said. "Tell us what's inside." Maya's expression remained calm. Not angry. Not frightened. Just tired. The kind of tired that came from carrying something important for a very long time. "I already told you," she replied. "Please contact the federal number in my file." Ryan's mouth curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. Beside him, Officer Derek Collins folded his arms. "That's what they all say when they don't want us looking closer." A few feet away, a family quietly guided their children toward another security lane. A businessman stopped pretending to check his phone. Somewhere behind the growing crowd, a camera clicked. Maya noticed it but said nothing. The silence around her seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. Ryan pressed a button. The case unlocked with a sharp mechanical snap. Several people leaned forward instinctively. Maya didn't. She simply watched as the lid slowly opened beneath the harsh white light. Ryan's confidence increased the moment he looked inside. Derek stepped closer. Both officers exchanged a glance that seemed to confirm everything they already believed. Ryan carefully lifted a thick envelope wrapped in protective plastic. Then another. Beneath them sat bundles of cash secured with official bands, a secure satellite phone, and several folders marked with identification numbers. Gasps moved through the crowd like a ripple across water. A woman covered her mouth. Someone whispered the word smuggler. Another person repeated it louder. Within seconds, the label spread farther than the truth ever could. Ryan straightened his shoulders. This was exactly the kind of discovery that made careers. "Well," he announced, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "looks like we found something interesting." The crowd shifted closer. Phones appeared. Screens glowed. Maya remained perfectly still. Her hands rested at her sides. Her breathing never changed. That calmness irritated Ryan more than denial would have. Most people argued. Most people panicked. Most people begged to explain. Maya Brooks simply stood there beneath the bright airport lights as if she already knew something nobody else in the terminal understood. Outside the massive windows overlooking the runway, gray clouds rolled across the afternoon sky. Rain streaked the glass. Inside, Ryan held up one of the sealed envelopes like a trophy while whispers multiplied around him. The story was already being written in people's minds. A black woman. A mysterious case. Suspicious contents. Assumptions arrived faster than facts. Maya looked past the officers toward the rain-covered runway and quietly repeated the same sentence she had given from the beginning. "Call the federal number." Ryan laughed softly. "We're way past phone calls now." For the first time, Maya lowered her eyes. Not in defeat. Not in fear. More like disappointment. As though the real problem wasn't what had just happened. It was what was about to happen next. The atmosphere inside the airport shifted within minutes. Uniformed officers moved with purpose. Portable barriers appeared. Curious travelers were redirected toward neighboring checkpoints, but not before dozens of phones captured images of Maya Brooks standing beside the inspection table. The whispers continued to spread. Some people claimed they had seen stacks of illegal money. Others insisted the mysterious phone proved she was connected to something criminal. By the time the rumors reached the far end of the terminal, the story barely resembled reality. Maya sat quietly in a small interview room overlooking a rain-soaked service road. The room was cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly. Overhead, a clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Officer Ryan Walker stood outside the glass panel speaking with supervisors. Every few moments he glanced toward the room, convinced he had uncovered something significant. Inside, Maya folded her hands and waited. She had spent most of her life learning patience. Long before airports and investigations, before federal contacts and secure files, she had grown up in a modest neighborhood outside Baltimore. Her mother worked double shifts at a nursing home. Her grandfather repaired air conditioning units throughout the summer heat. They taught her that dignity was something nobody could hand you and nobody could take away. Even now, surrounded by suspicion, she remembered those lessons. The door opened. Derek Collins entered carrying a paper folder. He sat across from her and slowly spread several photographs across the metal table. Images of the contents recovered from the black case stared back under the bright light. The bundles of cash. The satellite phone. The coded lists. Derek leaned back in his chair. "You still want us to call that number?" Maya nodded once. "Yes." "You are not worried?" he asked. "Should I be?" Derek frowned. Most people filled silence with explanations. Maya filled it with calm. Outside the room, rain tapped gently against the windows. Service trucks moved across the wet pavement. Airport workers hurried beneath reflective jackets. Life continued as though nothing unusual was happening. Yet somewhere beyond those clouds, deadlines were approaching. Timelines were narrowing. Maya understood that better than anyone in the building. She glanced toward the clock again. 3:47 in the afternoon. A small detail, but her eyes lingered for a moment too long. Derek noticed. "Waiting for something?" Maya looked back at him. "Someone." The answer unsettled him more than he expected. He gathered the photographs and stood. As he reached the door, his radio crackled. A voice requested Officer Walker immediately. Derek stepped outside. Through the glass, Maya watched both officers gather near a security desk. Ryan answered a phone call. At first his expression remained confident. Then the confidence faded. His posture stiffened. The color slowly drained from his face. Several supervisors turned toward him. One grabbed a notepad. Another looked directly toward the interview room. Maya could not hear the conversation, but she recognized the reaction. Something had changed. Ryan ended the call and stared through the glass toward her. For the first time since opening the black case, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Maya lowered her gaze to the table. The ticking clock continued its steady rhythm. 3:49. Outside, the rain began falling harder. Somewhere beyond the airport, engines were already moving in her direction. 3:52. The second hand swept across the clock face with quiet precision. Maya Brooks sat motionless while activity outside the interview room accelerated. Officers moved faster. Radios crackled more frequently. The easy confidence that had filled the terminal an hour earlier was gone. In its place stood uncertainty. Ryan Walker paced near the security desk, phone pressed against his ear. His answers grew shorter with each passing moment. "Yes, sir." Pause. "I understand." Another pause. "No, sir, we have not released anything officially." The call ended. Ryan lowered the phone and stared through the glass again. Maya met his gaze for only a second before looking away. Not out of fear. Not out of submission. Simply because she had nothing left to prove. Derek Collins approached carrying a tablet. His expression was different now. The certainty had faded from his face. The number checked out, he said quietly. Ryan said nothing. Derek continued. Federal clearance. High level. Ryan rubbed his jaw. That does not explain the cash. No. It does not explain the phone. No. And it definitely does not explain why nobody told us she was coming. Derek looked toward Maya. Maybe somebody did. The words hung in the air. Nearby supervisors exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody liked surprises, especially the kind arriving from Washington. Outside the massive terminal windows, dark SUVs rolled through the airport access road. Their headlights reflected across wet pavement. Rainwater shimmered beneath. Flashing amber traffic lights. Maya noticed the vehicles immediately. She checked the clock again. 3:55. Right on time. A memory surfaced briefly. 20 months earlier she had stood in another room filled with officials and maps and sealed folders. The operation had been explained in careful detail. Every movement mattered. Every delay created risk. Every assumption could become a problem. She remembered one sentence more clearly than the others. The greatest threat is not the criminals you know about. It is the people who think they already know the truth. Back in the present, the interview room door opened. Ryan stepped inside. For the first time his voice lacked authority. Who exactly are you? Maya looked at him calmly. I already told you who to call. Ryan pulled out a chair and sat down. The fluorescent light above reflected against the polished table. You could have explained this. Maya shook her head slightly. Could I? Ryan opened his mouth, then stopped. He thought back to the terminal. The whispers. The assumptions. The conclusions he had reached within minutes of seeing a black woman carrying unusual items through an airport. The answer embarrassed him. Before he could respond, a loud commotion echoed down the hallway. Multiple footsteps. Doors opening. Voices speaking with urgency. Every officer in sight turned toward the entrance corridor. Derek appeared at the doorway. His face had gone pale. Ryan. What? Derek swallowed hard. You need to come outside. Ryan stood immediately. Together they stepped into the corridor. Maya remained seated. The clock continued ticking. 3:57. Through the glass she watched as a group of sharply dressed federal officials entered the terminal security area. They moved with quiet confidence. No raised voices. No wasted motion. At the center of the group walked a silver-haired woman carrying a black leather portfolio. The moment supervisors recognized her, their posture changed. Conversations stopped. Even the rain seemed quieter against the windows. Maya finally allowed herself a slow breath. The waiting was almost over. The real story was about to begin. The silver-haired woman crossed the security area without hesitation. Water glistened on the shoulders of her dark coat from the rain outside, but she did not slow down. Every step carried the weight of someone accustomed to entering rooms where decisions mattered. Airport supervisors moved aside immediately. Federal credentials appeared. Quiet conversations ended. Officer Ryan Walker stood frozen near the security desk as the woman stopped directly in front of him. I am Director Eleanor Hayes, she said. Her voice was calm, yet every word landed with unmistakable authority. Where is Maya Brooks? Ryan straightened instinctively. She is in an interview room. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. Interview room? Ryan swallowed. Yes, ma'am. For a moment, nobody spoke. Rain tapped steadily against the giant windows overlooking the runway. The distant sound of aircraft engines rolled through the building like distant thunder. Then Eleanor extended her hand. The case. Ryan hesitated before signaling to another officer. Within seconds, the black case and its contents were placed on a nearby table. Eleanor opened the folders one by one. Her expression never changed. She examined the satellite phone, the sealed envelopes, the coded documents. Then she closed the folder carefully and looked directly at Ryan. Who authorized this inspection? The question sounded simple. Ryan suddenly wished it were not. I did. Eleanor nodded once. And before opening federally protected materials, did you contact the number attached to her clearance file? Ryan remained silent. The answer was obvious. Around them, several supervisors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Derek Collins shifted his weight but said nothing. Eleanor took a slow breath. You had one responsibility. One phone call. Her disappointment seemed far heavier than anger. Across the hallway, Maya remained seated behind the glass. She could see the conversation unfolding even though she could not hear every word. None of it surprised her. The operation had always been delicate. One wrong assumption could create consequences far beyond an airport terminal. Eleanor finally turned toward the interview room. The moment she entered, the atmosphere changed completely. Maya stood. The two women exchanged a brief look that required no explanation. Professional respect. Mutual understanding. Months of preparation condensed into a single silent moment. Are you all right? Eleanor asked. Maya nodded. I am. Was anything compromised? Maya considered the question carefully. Not yet. Eleanor glanced toward the hallway. Through the glass, Ryan and several supervisors waited anxiously. Then we still have a chance. Maya lowered her eyes briefly toward the table. What about the schedule? Eleanor checked her watch. 4 o'clock exactly. Delayed, but not lost. Those words seemed to relieve Maya more than anything else. Outside, another convoy of dark vehicles entered the airport grounds. More federal personnel emerged carrying secured cases and encrypted equipment. Whatever operation was unfolding extended far beyond the contents of a single black case. Ryan watched through the glass as federal agents filled the corridor. For the first time all day, a realization settled heavily over him. The woman he had confidently judged an hour earlier was not at the center of a criminal investigation. She was at the center of something far bigger. And somewhere within that larger mission, a detail remained hidden. A detail important enough to bring federal leadership through a storm to an airport on a rainy afternoon. The real purpose behind Maya's journey had still not been revealed. 4:10 in the afternoon. Rain continued sliding down the towering airport windows in silver streams, turning the runway lights into blurred streaks of gold and white. The terminal had grown strangely quiet. News of the federal arrival had spread faster than any official statement. Travelers who had once whispered accusations now watched from a distance, uncertain what to believe. Maya Brooks stood beside the conference table in a secured operations room as encrypted devices hummed softly around her. Federal agents reviewed schedules, maps, and incoming reports. Director Eleanor Hayes studied a digital display before turning toward Maya. We have less than 2 hours. Maya nodded. Then we cannot afford another delay. The words caught the attention of several local supervisors standing along the wall. Until now, most of them had assumed the mysterious case involved evidence from a completed investigation. They were wrong. Whatever Maya had been carrying was not the end of an operation. It was the beginning of one. Ryan Walker remained near the doorway. No one had asked him to leave, but nobody had invited him into the discussion either. He watched as federal personnel treated Maya with a level of respect usually reserved for senior officials. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Earlier that day, he had seen a tired black woman traveling alone. Now he was watching highly trained professionals wait for her recommendations before making decisions. A young federal analyst approached the table carrying a tablet. We received the latest update. Maya accepted it and reviewed the information carefully. Her eyes moved across names, locations, and timestamps. The room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she looked up. The transport route changed. Eleanor frowned. Again? Yes. Maya pointed toward the screen. Someone warned them. A heavy silence settled over the room. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the clouds. The sound was distant but unmistakable. Someone had leaked information. Someone connected to the operation had been feeding updates to the people under investigation. Ryan felt an uncomfortable sensation in his chest. He remembered the contents of the case. The cash. The phone. The coded lists. None of it had belonged to criminals. It belonged to the investigation itself. The realization made his earlier confidence feel reckless. Maya continued reviewing reports. For months she had traveled across multiple states gathering information connected to a sophisticated trafficking network that moved vulnerable people through hidden channels across the country. The coded lists identified victims. The marked money traced financial transactions. The secure phone connected undercover teams operating in different cities. Every item in the black case represented months of sacrifice from people working quietly behind the scenes. One careless mistake could have destroyed all of it. Yet, despite everything that had happened, Maya's focus never drifted toward blame. Her attention remained fixed on the mission. Eleanor studied her for a moment. You are thinking about something. Maya nodded slowly. The leak. You have a theory? Maya looked toward the rain-covered windows. Reflections shimmered across the glass. Airport lights flickered in the growing darkness. Not a theory, she said quietly. A pattern. Several agents exchanged looks. Maya reached for one of the folders recovered from the case and opened it carefully. Inside were pages of coded observations collected over many months. She turned to a specific page and placed her finger beside a name. Eleanor's expression changed instantly. The room became still. Ryan could not see the document clearly from where he stood, but he noticed something unsettling. For the first time all afternoon, Director Hayes looked genuinely concerned. Whatever Maya had just found was far more important than anyone in the room had realized. The room remained silent long after Maya removed her finger from the page. Rain continued tapping against the windows, softer now, like a distant clock counting down the remaining minutes. Director Eleanor Hayes closed the folder slowly and rested both hands on the table. No one rushed to speak. No one rushed to move. The weight of what they had just discovered settled over the room like a heavy winter blanket. Maya walked toward the windows overlooking the runway. Outside, aircraft lights glowed through the mist, appearing and disappearing behind sheets of rain. For a moment she simply stood there, watching. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass. Tired eyes. Steady posture. Months of travel. Months of sacrifice. Months of pretending to be someone she was not. Behind her, federal agents quietly reviewed reports and encrypted messages. Computer screens cast pale blue light across the conference room walls. The low hum of equipment blended with the distant sound of jet engines. Everything felt suspended between two worlds. The operation was still alive. Yet one wrong move could still destroy it. Eleanor approached the window and stood beside her. You knew. There was a leak before today. It was not a question. Maya nodded. I suspected it. Why did you not say anything sooner? Maya kept her eyes on the rain. Because suspicion is not evidence. Eleanor understood immediately. That answer explained why Maya had been trusted with such responsibility. She never acted on assumptions. She acted on facts. The same lesson others in the building had failed to follow only hours earlier. Across the room, Ryan Walker remained near the doorway. Nobody was paying attention to him now. For the first time all day, he felt invisible. He watched Maya standing by the window and replayed every moment from the terminal. The opened case. The whispers. The assumptions. The certainty in his own voice. Looking back, none of it felt justified anymore. He realized he had spent years believing experience allowed him to read people instantly. Today had exposed how dangerous that belief could become. Maya turned away from the glass and walked back toward the conference table. The folder remained open where she had left it. Several names appeared on the page, connected by dates, locations, and coded notes. One name carried a red mark beside it. The mark was small. Almost insignificant. Yet it had changed everything. Eleanor looked down at the page again. If this pattern is correct, then someone inside the system has been protecting them for years. Maya nodded. And every time investigators got close, information reached the network before arrests could happen. Another silence followed. Outside, the rain finally began to ease. The clouds above the runway slowly thinned, allowing faint evening sunlight to break through. Golden reflections stretched across the wet pavement. For the first time that day, the airport looked brighter. Maya noticed the change immediately. Her grandfather used to say storms reveal more than they hide. People spent so much time watching the rain that they forgot to look for what appeared afterward. She thought about that now. The truth had always been there. Hidden in patterns. Hidden in details. Hidden behind assumptions. And somewhere within the growing stack of evidence sitting on the table, the final piece was waiting to be found. The sun finally broke through the clouds at 4:32 in the afternoon. Long beams of golden light stretched across the wet runway, reflecting off aircraft tails and service vehicles like ribbons of polished glass. Inside the conference room, every screen remained active. Data flowed across monitors. Timelines shifted. Reports arrived from multiple states. Yet all attention remained focused on the single folder lying open in front of Maya Brooks. Director Eleanor Hayes turned another page carefully. The coded notes now revealed a pattern so clear it could no longer be ignored. Dates matched failed operations. Locations matched unexpected escapes. Every time investigators moved close to dismantling a trafficking route, someone inside the system had quietly redirected attention elsewhere. The leak was real. The question was no longer whether it existed. The question was who stood behind it. A federal analyst suddenly looked up from his workstation. Director. The room immediately grew still. The analyst projected a series of records onto the large screen at the far end of the room. Names appeared. Travel logs. Communication records. Access requests. Authorization signatures. Maya stepped closer. Eleanor folded her arms. The analyst enlarged one specific file. Several matching timestamps appeared beside it. Then another. Then another. A visible connection emerged across the screen. Ryan Walker felt his stomach tighten. He recognized some of the records. They originated from law enforcement databases. The analyst continued. Every compromised operation passed through the same review channel before information reached the field. Nobody spoke. The room seemed to shrink around the screen. Maya stared at the evidence. For months she had chased fragments. Now those fragments were finally forming a complete picture. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. Can you verify this? The analyst nodded. 3 independent confirmations. Another agent added, the communication trail extends back nearly 4 years. A heavy silence followed. Outside the windows, the storm had completely passed. The runway gleamed beneath the evening sun. Inside, however, the atmosphere felt heavier than ever. Maya looked toward the final page in the folder. The same page she had identified earlier. The same page that had changed everything. Slowly, she placed it beside the projected records. The match was undeniable. Several federal agents exchanged stunned looks. One supervisor lowered his head. Another quietly stepped away from the table. Ryan stared at the screen, unable to look anywhere else. The operation he thought he understood had been something entirely different from the beginning. Maya had never been transporting evidence from a completed case. She had been carrying the final pieces needed to expose a hidden network operating behind official titles and trusted positions. Months of undercover work. Months of gathering proof. Months of risking everything to reach this moment. Eleanor finally exhaled. So that is why they kept moving ahead of us. Maya nodded. Someone was helping them stay invisible. The analyst entered one final command. A name appeared at the center of the screen, surrounded by years of connected records. The room froze. No one had expected the trail to lead that high. Ryan felt the blood drain from his face as he realized the truth. The people Maya had been investigating were never the biggest threat. The real danger had been hiding behind authority all along. And now, for the first time in years, that hidden truth had nowhere left to run. No one spoke for several seconds after the name appeared on the screen. The silence felt heavier than any accusation. It was the kind of silence that arrived when a room full of professionals suddenly realized they had been looking in the wrong direction for years. Director Eleanor Hayes stared at the display, her reflection faintly visible in the dark monitor. The evidence surrounding the name was overwhelming. Access records. Internal approvals. Communication patterns. Financial anomalies. Separately, each detail might have been dismissed. Together, they formed a picture that could no longer be ignored. Maya Brooks remained calm. She had imagined this moment many times during long flights, lonely hotel stays, and endless hours reviewing reports under dim desk lamps. Yet standing here now, she felt no satisfaction. Only relief. The victims whose names filled the folders had waited years for someone to connect the pieces. This was never about proving herself right. It was about making sure the truth finally reached daylight. Across the room, federal agents immediately began coordinating with offices in multiple states. Phones rang. Secure messages flowed across encrypted screens. New instructions were issued. The investigation that had spent years moving quietly in the shadows was suddenly accelerating. Every minute mattered now. Ryan Walker watched from near the doorway. Earlier that day he had been certain of everything. Now certainty felt dangerous. He replayed the moment Maya had asked for a single phone call. One simple request. One opportunity to slow down and verify the facts. Instead, he had trusted assumptions. The realization sat heavily on his shoulders. Eleanor finally turned away from the screen and faced Maya. You carried this operation for nearly 2 years. Maya lowered her eyes briefly. A lot of people carried it. But you protected the final evidence. Maya glanced toward the black case resting on a nearby table. It looked ordinary now. Just another piece of luggage among thousands passing through airports every day. Nobody looking at it would understand how many lives were connected to what it contained. The marked money. The coded records. The secure communications. Every item represented someone who had trusted the system enough to come forward. Eleanor stepped closer. You knew this could happen today. Maya nodded. Not exactly like this. But you expected resistance. A faint smile touched Maya's face. People do not like having their assumptions challenged. Ryan heard the words clearly. They were not spoken with bitterness. They were spoken with understanding. Somehow that made them harder to hear. Outside the windows, the evening sky had transformed completely. The storm clouds were gone. Sunlight painted the wet runway in shades of gold and amber. Aircraft moved slowly across the tarmac while distant lights flickered to life around the airport. The world looked cleaner after the rain. An analyst approached Eleanor carrying a fresh report. She reviewed it quickly before looking back toward Maya. The first warrants are already moving forward. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Months of uncertainty were finally giving way to action. Maya closed the folder in front of her and rested her hand on the cover. The names inside would no longer remain hidden. The truth was moving now. And for the first time since she stepped into the airport that afternoon, she allowed herself to believe that the mission she had protected for so long might finally reach the ending it deserved. The airport looked completely different by 6 o'clock that evening. The storm was gone. The sky beyond the terminal windows glowed with deep shades of orange and blue as the sun settled beyond the horizon. Reflections stretched across the rain-washed pavement outside, turning every light into a ribbon of gold. Inside the operations room, the urgency had eased. Federal agents still worked quietly, reviewing reports and coordinating with offices across the country, but the tension that had dominated the day had finally begun to lift. Director Eleanor Hayes stood near the window holding a fresh briefing packet. Months of investigation were now moving toward resolution. The evidence Maya Brooks had protected was already changing lives. Victims who had spent years waiting to be heard would finally have answers. Networks that had hidden behind secrecy would no longer remain invisible. Maya gathered the last of her materials and carefully placed them inside the black case. The same case that had attracted suspicion only hours earlier now sat on the table as proof of perseverance. She closed the latches and rested her hand on the handle for a moment. The room around her felt quieter than before. Not empty. Peaceful. Eleanor approached and offered a small smile. You should get some rest. Maya smiled back. Maybe tomorrow. Eleanor laughed softly. That sounds like something you have been saying for 2 years. Maya could not argue with that. She glanced toward the windows where the final sunlight shimmered across the runway. For so long, every day had been about the next lead, the next report, the next piece of evidence. Now, for the first time in a very long time, there was space to breathe. Near the doorway, Ryan Walker remained standing. He had spent most of the afternoon replaying his decisions. When Maya began walking toward the exit, he stepped forward. For a moment neither of them spoke. The sounds of keyboards and distant conversations faded into the background. Ryan looked down briefly before meeting her eyes. I was wrong. The words came quietly. Honest. Without excuses. Maya studied him for a second. She could see the regret on his face. Not because he had been embarrassed. Because he finally understood. Ryan took a slow breath. I thought I knew what I was looking at. Maya nodded gently. Sometimes we all do. He expected anger. He expected judgment. Instead he found something much harder to forget. Grace. Maya adjusted the strap of her bag and looked toward the fading sunlight outside. The truth usually takes longer than assumptions, she said softly. But it is worth waiting for. Ryan nodded. He would remember those words for a very long time. Maya continued walking. No speeches. No celebration. No dramatic ending. Just steady footsteps across the polished floor. She passed the security area where everything had started earlier that day. The barriers were gone. The crowds had disappeared. Travelers moved through the terminal unaware of the story that had unfolded there. Outside the automatic doors, cool evening air greeted her. The pavement still carried traces of rain. Airport lights flickered to life one by one. Maya paused for a moment beneath the fading sky and looked out across the glowing runway. The storm had passed. The truth had been revealed. Somewhere beyond the lights, families would receive answers. Victims would receive justice. And people who had spent years hiding behind power would no longer control the story. Maya took a final breath, lifted the black case, and walked forward into the evening. Behind her, the airport lights reflected across the wet ground like stars. Ahead of her, the night opened wide and quiet. And in that silence, justice finally felt complete.